impossible to hit the end ranges. So just think about, like, if this is the full excursion. So over here is early, over here is late, in here is middle. As soon as I put you under load. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand, and it is perfect. All right. Kind of a wacky Tuesday. Got to make a hard pivot here, so we're going to dig straight into today's Q&A. And this is with Larry, an iFastU member. If you're not signed up for iFast University, please go to ifastuniversity.com. Get yourself signed up so you can participate in the ongoing discussion, as well as our bi-weekly Q&As and other great content. Anyway, Larry's questions are actually going to be really helpful for a lot of people, because I think they clarify some things in regards to the propulsive foot representations and how to identify those. And then we kind of slid seamlessly into some compensatory strategies and how to identify those in elements of, say, a split squat, and especially when we're adding load, what actually happens to the propulsive phase. So again, very useful, I think, for a lot of people in regards to their understanding of how we're going to influence our programming and exercise selection based on where we want to put people in this propulsive phase. So thank you, Larry, for the question. If you'd like to participate in a 15-minute consultation, please go to askbillhartman@gmail.com, askbillhartman@gmail.com. Put 15-minute consultation in the subject line, and we'll arrange that at our mutual convenience. Everybody have an outstanding Tuesday. I will see you all tomorrow. All right, Larry, what is your question?
So I'll just boil it down to the big picture and let you take it from there. I think that I understand to some degree looking at gait through the foot, primarily based on the fact that, if the tibia is behind the ankle, then you're kind of in early and it advances from there. When the heel leaves the ground and the tibia is forward, then you're moving into late, and somewhere in between there is mid propulsion. No. Great. Good place to start.
Okay. So you got a misrepresentation in your head because of you're not looking at the relative position of the tibia, because you've got an externally rotated representation in early and an externally rotated representation in late.
Right.
So the tibia is in its relative position to the foot is actually the same as far as its position. So let me show you. Okay. So this is a common error. Okay. So a lot of folks run into this. Okay.
Okay.
So in an early representation of the foot. Okay. So this is an ER tibia. It is what would be termed as a supinated foot. So I've got an arch, right? And I've got first head down and the big toe is down. So that's my early representation. Okay. You follow that, right? So this would be the end of what would traditionally be referred to as heel rocker. So heel rocker takes place, the foot comes down and the tibia is behind the ankle. Okay. And it's ER'd.
All right.
All right. So that's my early. Okay. Middle is the ankle rocker portion where the tibia is translating over the foot. Okay. And then the arch has to go down. Otherwise, the tibia can't move forward into its IR representation. Okay.
Right.
Remember, early is ER. I move into IR. The tibia translates over the foot. The arch goes down.
Right.
Okay. The heel breaks from the ground. So I hit max P, and then I go back into an ER representation of the foot. So the tibia is not going this way. It's actually going back relative. So if I put you back in an early representation, the tibia is moving back into an ER representation. So the tibia goes forward, hits max P, it can't go forward anymore.
Right.
So for it to go back into an ER representation, the heel comes up, but the tibia is moving backwards at the same time. So even though from the ground perspective, it looks like it's tilted forward, it's actually tilting backwards relative to the foot, which is the ER representation. Do you see the difference?
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
It almost sounds like what I said initially, with the exception of the fact that I think at the and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, at the last phase, I wasn't looking at relative position of the foot to the tibia.
Right. So if the tibia wouldn't come backwards as the heel comes up, your knee would get closer to the ground. So this would be like if you were lunging forward with your left leg, the back leg would be in that position. You see it?
Right.
It would take the tibia forward and the knee would move closer to the floor. If we're walking, right, the knee's got to translate forward, not down.
Okay.
Right. And so that's why the tibia is moving up and back. Does that help you see it?
Yes, and it also brings up another question, which is, or potentially opens a little bit of light, sheds a little bit of light on the difficulty in understanding it from the standpoint of movement, vis-a-vis lunges or whatever, right? Because I don't know why. I was just thinking that, I wasn't looking at what you just said about that. If you're in a split stance position and you're moving, and the front knee is moving forward, the back knee is moving forward too, but sort of forward and down. It wouldn't be that way in gait. It wouldn't happen in gait.
No, because again, I'm not moving the knee closer to the ground. I'm trying to translate forward. So I'm propelling myself, which would be forward, not down into the ground. So the thing about like a split stance versus gait is that because the position, okay, at the bottom of a split squat is a representation of middle propulsion. So the tibia should be forward over the foot. So the end of middle propulsion is there. Okay.
Yep.
If I'm doing a lunge, I'm not really I'm moving towards a late representation, but the tibia is still forward. So I'm not pulling it all the way back into its latest representation. I'm sort of on the late side of middle because my tibia is moving down, or it's moving the knee towards the floor. When you're lifting weights, okay, and you're loaded and you're in these IR positions, there's no way that you can access the end ranges of early or late because the load or the position limits how much external rotation is available, because external rotation is where the biggest space is to move into. And that's where I would have the greatest relative joint motion. But if I give you, let's just say that I give you 2 20K kettlebells, right? One in each hand, and you're going to do a split squat, that immediately sticks you closer to middle and takes away your end range excursions. So you're going to be playing like middle plus or minus a little bit of early, a little bit of late. So it squeezes that space in. That's why force production goes up, because the highest force production is that max propulsion, which is that maximum IR representation.
Right.
Okay. So the foot should reflect that, right? The tibia position should reflect that. Right. Because if you would be in a true late representation, in a true early representation, it's very difficult to produce maximum force. And that's what a lot of people try to do because they can't access their full internal rotation capabilities. And so that's why you see substitutions in split squats and lunges and step ups, and well, just pick any exercise really.
Yeah, because both ends, early and late, are external rotation.
Correct.
You can't get force, or you can't get you have to substitute something to get force.
Right. It's not the ideal place to be producing force. Therefore, you have to have a compensatory strategy. So this is where you would see somebody anteriorly orient the pelvis as a substitution for acquiring the the ideal representation of internal rotation. It's still an internal rotation, just less than ideal as far as force production goes, less than ideal as far as creating the transition from ER to IR effectively, right? And so again, you're more likely to create a compressive strategy that might result in, at worst case, pain, right? And then sort of best case, a limitation in other ranges of motion, right? So thus the compensatory strategies that you'll see layered on top of that, right? So if I anteriorly orient the pelvis, right, that's my IR representation because I don't have ER. And then maybe they're going to try to create some more ER, and you'll see like the knee move away from midline at the same time, right? So all of these compensatory strategies that we see are associated with trying to find space to move into and still produce force into the ground, right? Because that is a requirement of being on the ground in gravity.
That would also include hip hike as a substitution.
Correct. That would be it. That's another IR substitution. Absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot of people, including myself, I think, really have a hard time, if ever, getting the first med head down because they're so far on the outside edge of their foot. You know, or they stay in this kind of supinated foot position, which makes it difficult to get the first med head down. Or you can get the big toe down, but not the first med head, so you're not really getting pronated.
That is correct. That is correct. Yes.
Right. So they're never expressing. So is that an energy leak, or it's just they're not being?
What is an energy leak?
Well, in other words, not all the force is going into the ground. It's being dispersed. Well,
you're still putting force into the ground. The question mark is like how are you accomplishing that? Because it takes relative motions to get to the position of pronation. Okay. You look at everything in a sequence. So I get the medial heel and first med head down. To do that, I have to have a subtalar joint in the ankle foot that allows that to happen, so I can actually access that position from a relative position of ER to IR. If I stay supinated, I'm still putting force into the ground. It's just going to be a less than an ideal situation. So, if I get a runner that comes in to the purple room and they've got a history of a fifth metatarsal fracture, you want to know why that happens? That's a focal load on the fifth metatarsal for somebody that could not capture a foot position with normal relative motions. Right. So if they're in a much later representation of propulsion and they're trying to put force into the ground, they're trying to slow themselves down to put force into the ground. They're still going to do it. They're just going to use a much more less desirable compensatory strategy. So again, that's a pelvis that's moving as a single unit into that anterior rotation to push down into the ground. But the foot that you're pushing down into the ground with, again, less than ideal distribution of force. It becomes a focal load, right? So maybe the focal load goes all the way up into a hip joint. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because I know your medical history, right? Right. Yeah. We both get to tell that same story, boss. So I'm not picking on you.
Listen, I know your history too, and so I know you're ahead of me in the bionic man race for bionic man status.
The more replacement parts I get, Larry, the longer I live.
Possibly, yeah. Although, like you've said before, it's still a fake hip. I mean, it's still an artificial hip.
It's not real. That's one thing you want to make sure. Does this help you, though? Does this help you see this representation of the transitions and then why you start to see the compensatory strategies layered on? So don't consider the split squat gait per se, but there are elements that are similar. And then there are because of context, there are limitations in how much of the excursion that you'll see. That's the thing that I think that might be a little bit of a point of confusion for you, is to not see this exactly the same.
Right. So to summarize, kind of summarize what you've said so far is, number one, if you're doing a split squat, a squat, or anything where you're loaded and you're compressed and you're creating compression, you're going to be somewhere in the middle. And never, truly early late.
It's impossible to hit the end ranges. So just think about, like, if this is the full excursion. So over here is early, over here is late, in here is middle. As soon as I put you under load, I just took away the ends, right? I still have an early, I still have a late, it's not as big. And then my middle is going to be represented as a much more pronounced component of the activity because I'm spending more of my time there.
Yeah.
Okay. Because time is slower under load, time is slower because it's more of an IR representation.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm trying to maximize range of motion a loaded activity is less likely to produce it than an unloaded activity, right? And so that's one of those considerations that I need to always take into mind as I'm doing my program. It's like, what is my goal here? It's like if I'm trying to avoid stealing all of the range of motion, then that's my dead center middle kind of activity. So those are bilateral, symmetrical, heavy load stuff. And then out here is your body weight or less than body weight by reducing the influence of gravity out here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And because, when you're trying to produce maximum force, you don't want movement.
I don't. That's exactly right. That is exactly right. Hey, I hate to be rude. I got to get to the next call. Okay. I hope this was helpful for you.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, man. I'll see you later.
Okay.